to the Cincinnati USA Regional Chamber's Racial Equity Series. I'm Jill Meyer, the President and CEO, and I thank you for joining us. The Chamber has long prioritized inclusion in everything that we do, and we need to do more. Last week, we issued our endorsement for the state of Ohio, Hamilton counties, and the city of Cincinnati's impending resolutions to declare racism a public health crisis. Along with our endorsement, we are pushing for and committed to helping to bring about the actions needed throughout our community to address the inequities, both creating and resulting from this harsh reality. We also continue to prioritize our work already underway at the Chamber to address the insidious economic effects of racism. We continue to elevate and invest in the nationally leading work of our Minority Business Accelerator, our groundbreaking Workforce Innovation Center, and the array of programming in our Diverse by Design training and leadership offerings, like cultural competency for leaders. We're also adding new learning opportunities, like this Racial Equity Series, which is an extension of our Diverse by Design and Leadership Now virtual platform. These are strategies to reduce economic disparities that exist in our region as a result of racism. We see the stark current realities and understand the critical importance of creating inclusive workplaces, more minority-owned businesses, and more inclusive communities to help drive change. We believe that positive change is accelerated through education, tough discussions, courage, discomfort, and empathy. You do too. That's why you're here. Thank you for prioritizing your role in creating a more equitable Cincinnati region. We are grateful to BI3, Bethesda Inc.'s grant-making initiative to transform health, for sponsoring this series, and we're so happy that Bethesda Inc.'s president, Jill Miller, is here with us today. Thank you, Jill.
Thanks, Jill. BI3, Bethesda Inc.'s grant-making initiative to transform health, is proud to partner with the Chamber to bring you this Racial Equity Series to equip members of our business community with a better understanding of structural racism and the role they can play to build more diverse, equitable, and inclusive workplaces and cultures. BI3 fuels collaborations and partnerships to disrupt the status quo and tackle the social, racial, and economic disparities to achieve equitable health outcomes. This is going to take strong leaders like you in all sectors to create change. But I believe in a day when every Cincinnatian has equal opportunity to achieve their highest level of health and well-being. And I want to personally thank you for coming on this journey with us.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Darren Reedus. I'm the Executive Director of the Minority Business Accelerator here at the Cincinnati USA Regional Chamber and your moderator for today's session. I'm eager to dive into our discussion today as I've dedicated my career to advancing leaders of color, and I'm hopeful that today's conversation will provide you with insights and tools to help you build a more inclusive set of relationships that matter. We are joined today by panelists Regina Carswell-Russo and Michael Moore. Regina Carswell-Russo is a mother, communications expert, arts ambassador, recovering TV journalist, freedom fighter, and the CEO and founder of Right Now Communications, LLC. Regina has spent more than 30 years as a master storyteller for news outlets in the Midwest. And so thank you, Regina, for joining us today. Michael Moore is the founder of Black Achievers, a nonprofit organization with 4,000 plus members in the Cincinnati region and over 30,000 members nationwide. Michael's mission is to connect, educate, economically empower African-American communities. He is also the author of Achieve Your Dreams, the 9 Principles of African-American Success. And so thank you, Michael, for joining us today. To our audience, we hope you will actively engage in today's conversation by posting your questions in the Q&A and posting comments for everyone in the chat. We will do our best to monitor these questions and answer them throughout the session. Please take a look at our slide. Today's conversation is fundamentally focused on relationships, which we will examine from the lens of marketing and communications, talent, vendor relationships, and succession planning, to name a few. As you take a look at this slide, perhaps take a picture and begin answering some of these questions for your own organization. We will cover many of these throughout our discussion this afternoon. So let's jump in. I'm going to start, Regina, with you. You have dedicated your life to communications. Marketing communication, of course, is critical as it helps people determine if they want to buy your product or service, they want to engage with you, etc. So my first question, Regina, would be, what insights would you share with the leaders on our call to be more intentional about their communication strategy?
Well, first, thank you. This is exciting, and I hope that we can have real talk today with everyone. I invite everyone to, again, put things in the chat and just be really honest about it. Don't be delicate, don't be polished, but be real and authentic so we can get to the heart of the matter. I'm so happy to talk about this. Wherever I work with any of my clients or any of the other organizations I've worked with, one of the first things we always do when we talk about making sure that we are walking the walk with diversity, equity, inclusion is how are we showing up externally? This is like low-hanging fruit for me, right? And it's so interesting because a lot of times people just miss the easiest steps. When you say that, you know, you're for everyone, we're inviting, we want people to work with us that come from diverse backgrounds, we want people to support us, we want people to work with us. Do you show that on your website? Do you show that in any of the collateral that you are putting out? Do you speak that kind of language when you are out recruiting? How are you showing up? That's the easiest thing that I can see. And it's pretty simple. Think about, what do you want your workforce to look like? What do you want your supporters to look like and your clients to look like? And then show it. Show it in real, authentic ways. And sometimes that's training the people on the inside to look for people who may be a little different. And that's one of the first things that we do. We do a big audit of how we're showing up externally.
Awesome. Thank you, Regina. I'm going to stay with you for one more question before I turn it over to Michael here. So leaders that want to be more inclusive in their engagements are often seeking the tools or guidance of how to engage people of color. Give us some examples of perhaps what they should be thinking about on the how to.
That's an interesting question. Well, let me change that. Maybe not so much interesting as common question. That's the first question that most people lean into. How do I do it, right? How do I bring people on that don't look like me? And what we talked about yesterday is that African Americans are not these mythical creatures that live in a parallel universe alongside the rest of everyone else. You know people who look different from you, who speak a different language, have a different religion, have a different race, have a different culture. You see and you know them. And we speak the same language. There are universal truths that we all embrace. And how you connect with people that look like you, maybe go to the same church as you, is how you can connect with someone else. When I was in broadcast news, it was my job to take a subject every day, and I had limited amount of time to dissect that subject, to find the biggest, greatest hits of the sound bites, put it together, write it, and then communicate it, translate it back to an audience. I didn't know who was watching me. I didn't know if that person was from Indian Hill or Bond Hill. I didn't know if that person was 80 years old or 5 years old, but I knew that whatever I said had to connect across generation, across culture. So what do? You find the universal truths that connect with everyone, right? So if your business wants to be about diversity, well, what makes it attractive for diverse people to come work with you? Are you warm? Are you innovative? Do you support people in their ascension to leadership? What are those universal truths in your product? Are you consistent? Are you responsive? Are you about excellence? Speaking this kind of language and integrating this kind of language is very important. And the other thing is, and I'm just going to be very blunt, and I'm sorry if it's too direct, but don't be lazy. Don't be lazy, right? What do we tell our children? Go and talk to someone on the table next to you. Go across the hall. Be assertive, embrace, be bold, have empathy. You can do that in your organizations as well. Reach out across, I hate to say the aisle, but reach out across for people who don't maybe go to the same store as you, listen to the same music, or have the same interests. Don't be lazy, be bold. Be bold, because in bold comes innovation. And with innovation comes disruption. And with disruption comes new ways of doing things better and stronger. So that's what I would suggest. And then also ask for help.
Awesome. Thank you, Regina. And I love the reiteration of just being blunt and having real talk. We're not going to, of course, solve for some of these sensitivities if we don't have the environment we can just speak freely about our challenges. So thank you for reiterating that. These are helpful insights to help us think about developing intentional relationships as well. An example of an intentional relationship could be an organization like Black Achievers. So Mike, I'll turn it over to you. Please take a moment to provide an overview for our listeners of Black Achievers. Actually, I think you're still muted, my friend.
I have to unmute. Okay.
There we go. All right.
Thanks for having me today, Darren. So my name is Michael Moore, and I'm the founder and president of Black Achievers. As you stated earlier, Black Achievers is a nonprofit organization that I started in 2018. We have over 4,000 members in Cincinnati and over 30,000 nationwide. So we're fast becoming one of the largest African-American professional organizations in the state of Ohio. So we're extremely proud of that. And one of the first things that I get asked is like, what is a Black Achiever? And Black Achiever, basically by definition, and what I put in my book, is an African-American person who wants to achieve the American dream, right? So we want America to be a fair place for everyone, free of racism and sexism and all the other isms that are out here, and really create a community where we can all prosper. And we want our allies in the white community to work together with us to make Cincinnati a great place for everyone to live. And that's really the overall goal of what we're trying to accomplish. So our mission is to connect, educate, and economically empower African Americans. And I like to kind of break that down a little bit. And the connection piece is a culture in the African American community. A lot of us are isolated or feel isolated in our respective jobs and in corporate America and in different places. The feedback that we get a lot is that we feel like we're the only one in the room, or our opinions are not being taken seriously. We're having issues with microaggressions or issues not being able to navigate our careers the way we would like or get promoted in certain instances. And a lot of that we feel it is due to our race. So what we're trying to do is partner with allies in the white community to start to solve some of these problems and issues. And now with COVID, and then on top of COVID, it's disproportionately affecting the Black community. You have George Floyd and civil unrest, and you just have all of these issues that are basically overwhelming a lot of African American people. And the people that are part of our network, I mean, they're overwhelmingly saying that they need a support group. And that's basically what Black Achievers is for African American professionals. We're a support group that can say, hey, this is a safe space for you to be able to talk and to figure out solutions to the problems that you're having, and then also work with other institutions to help us basically start to achieve more. And then on the education piece, it's all about professional development, leadership development, and board development. We've been fortunate enough to serve as a pipeline for organizations already and have great success. We recently partnered with Jenny Berg, which is an amazing organization with the Leadership Council. We're connecting more African Americans through her BOLD program, which will help the community as well. Also partner with Megan Cummings at the Women's Fund, a Greater Cincinnati Foundation. They're doing an amazing thing with their program called Anointed for civil boards. As an African-American professional, I can tell you that I've never been approached or know many details about elected or civil boards. So I think that's a great opportunity for us to have African-Americans participate, especially when these boards are making decisions about our communities that are 60% and 70% African-American, but have very little board participation. And then we also have a very large, great partnership with Bill Tucker at Flywheel. This is an incubator, and it's a very exciting space for startups. A lot of millennials are starting businesses and want to know more about how to start a company, and Bill Tucker helps them. And over 40% of their constituents that they help are minority and women-owned businesses. And what they want is African Americans to be able to be in the pipeline for coaches. So we were able to give him basically 7 to 10 new coaches that are African American in just 1 month, individuals who have experience at all the major companies in the city, and now they'll be able to mentor and help African American and other minorities who are starting businesses. So that's an exciting partnership as well. And we're also acting as a conduit or a partnership for many businesses and setting up those relationships as well. And as far as like economic empowerment, we want to maximize African-American career earnings. So obviously navigating one's career is not something that is taught in school. So we have to do peer-to-peer teaching so that we're not recreating the wheel every time. Also, there's a big push for African-Americans to start to invest in our communities to help uplift Cincinnati. And we want philanthropy and starting to get more African-Americans involved in that. And ultimately, the goal is just to close the wealth gap. So we have a huge wealth gap, as we've seen all the statistics, and Black Achievers is working to educate our people and to start to move in a direction where we are closing that wealth gap and working with other institutions to do that and other companies. So we believe by doing these things, you know, we can make Cincinnati a mecca for Black talent, being able to retain talent here, making it a place that feels inclusive, really start to improve our image and really move in a direction in 2020 and 2021 that's just amazing for everyone involved in Cincinnati in general.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. I want to go a tad further with you. And you've shared a lot, which is terrific, about the organization itself, but share with our listeners why you started Black Achievers. And what ultimately are you striving for the Cincinnati region?
Yeah, so what we're really striving for is to, like I said, make this like a mecca and really a place that is able to attract and retain Black talent. So in the attraction side, you know, there's a survey, I think in 2016 from LinkedIn, it showed that 85% of all jobs are filled through networks or personal networking. And only 15% are through recruiters like, you know, and Indeed and things like that. And we have a disproportionate amount of African Americans who are in that 15% bucket. And really what we need to do is start creating relationships with companies so that they can be in the 85% bucket where these jobs aren't even posted, so that we can start to have relationships that lead to better employment for African Americans and basically better talent at these companies so that they can have diverse boards and diverse teams and really start to compete on a global scale. So that's one of our big goals. And we want to help try to solve that relationship problem by partnering with companies. That's our ultimate goal, so that we can start to create these relationships between whites, Blacks, different ethnic groups, so that we can have relationships outside of work. Because if you don't have relationships outside of work, then you have no pool to really pull from. And I think there's like a top 3 things I put together for companies can do to drive diversity and relationships outside of work. And one is to partner with a Black organization like Black Achievers or the Urban League or NAACP or National Black MBA or even local churches. Because if you don't have a partnership with an African-American organization, then it's very difficult for you to create these relationships that lead to employment or board appointments or things of that nature. And you want to use those relationships to find common ground. That's how you start to create a situation where you start to hire people you know, like, and trust. And that's a human condition. And we want people to find common ground. Cincinnati has a rich sports tradition. Obviously in 2020, that's not happening as much, but in 2021, you know, if your organization is sponsoring a golf outing, partner with an organization like ours that have our leadership team and our African-American professionals in your industry show up so that we can interact and start to create those relationships. Or if they're sponsoring a Reds game or a football game, the Bengals game, these are social interactions that you need to invite African-Americans to. Black Achievers can serve as that resource. Also in the arts and the Aeronaut, we have all of these amazing things in Cincinnati, but we don't want these experiences to continue to be segregated. We need to integrate them, and really Black Achievers can bring that opportunity to companies and organizations. And then lastly is be consistent. You know, this is not something we can solve in one day or one event. You have to do it on a monthly and continuous basis to start to create these relationships so that later on, African Americans are considered for these jobs in that 85% relationship-based situation. So those are the types of things that we're working on. And it's also as far as retaining talent. You know, one of the big things that we hear, 25% of our members are not born and raised here. So I was born and raised in Cincinnati. I went to Elder High School. I'm a West Sider. You know, I have a long history in the community, and I have a lot of resources that I can tap into. But if you come from Atlanta or Chicago and you've been recruited by one of our big companies, what happens is you feel isolated and you're like, hey, on the weekend, I'm gonna go back to Chicago or I'm going back to Atlanta. And we don't want that. You know, in order to retain this talent here, we have to create a community, citywide, that African Americans can tap into. And that's what Black Achievers can do. So it helps people from everything from finding a life partner to finding out where to send their kids to school, or what types of activities that they can do, and really have this rich ecosystem that's missing from Cincinnati. And that's what Black Achievers brings to the table. And I think that's a positive thing for the community abroad.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. And I'd like to also just sort of add to this. So the Minority Business Accelerator is super excited as well about partnering with Black Achievers. And so as Michael mentioned, the focus on talent certainly extends into the entrepreneurial space. For those that are perhaps not familiar with the Minority Business Accelerator, this was in fact birthed out of Cincinnati's own civil unrest, very importantly, originally founded in 2003, with a particular focus on creating larger scale African-American businesses. The Hispanic population was added to that a few years later. More specifically, the kinds of businesses that can create wealth for people of color and their employees, and more specifically, businesses that could do business with our supply chain, our large and major corporations and mid-cap companies in our community. And so it is interesting that we are at a place in time where now we have, of course, the national unrest that is taking place, and our Minority Business Accelerator model has been recognized as a potential model for other communities across the country. While we know we certainly have a lot more work to do, we have a lot to be proud of with respect to the progress that has been made. One of the things that we are striving to do, we have a four-pronged approach, if you will, to continue to take our work to the next level in the spirit of grow, build, attract, and create. Our grow bucket fundamentally is growing our current companies of size to their next level. Many may not realize that, so the minimum to be part of the Minority Business Accelerator is a minimum annual sales of 1 million in annual revenue. But the average is actually closer to $25 million today, and it is a robust group of businesses. And so our grow bucket is about, if you're already doing 10 million or so, how do we get you from 10 to 20 or 25 to 50? There are lots of tactics under there. But beyond the grow bucket, we have a build bucket, and build is about building a pipeline. This is a collaboration with the Cincinnati Minority Business Collaborative, a host of other minority serving groups in town, trying to identify at least 10 emerging minority firms annually, or 50 over the next 5 years, we believe have high growth potential, but under $1 million in revenue today. We have an attract bucket. So I work with Ready Cincinnati here in town to attract larger scale minority firms into our community in gaps where we don't have them presently. And then finally, which we'll also talk about more this afternoon as well, is creating minority firms through the acquisition of non-minority firms, if you will, or mainstream businesses with no succession plan, no kids in the company interested in taking it over. How can we help to identify credible minority buyers to acquire mainstream companies of size and create firms through acquisition? And so we're super excited about that as well. And so given that we know that the typical entrepreneurial path for many is to first start in corporate America, learn some skills and trade, and then spin out and run or launch your own business. And so our collaboration with Black Achievers is one where even just if 1% of their 4,000 plus members takes that path, that's at least 40 new entrepreneurs that we are excited about working with. So we are thrilled about our collaboration with Black Achievers. So Regina and Michael, back to you. Let's provide some specific tools to our listeners. We've shared a bit about, of course, Black Achievers, and I mentioned a little bit about the accelerator, but give some additional organizations for our listeners that folks can connect to or should consider to broaden and deepen their partnerships in the community. Whoever wants to go first, let's start with you, Michael. Actually, let's go to Regina. Let's go to Regina.
Well, you know, it's about it's intention, right? And so one of the things sometimes when I'm called in for companies and organizations to help with to expand the communication to the broader audience, it's you know, how do we get into the African American community? How do we talk to the African American community? And how do we do it in a way where it doesn't feel like we're asking for something and that it is not authentic? And you are right. People should be concerned about that because we see it. We know it. We know when it's coming. We know when February is rolling around, right? And so we're going to start getting some calls. And so what you need to do is ongoing, building it into your everyday structure and process. How are you extending invitations to have conversations? How are you extending invitations to participate, mentor, be a part of the organization in whatever way that you have? How are you doing that 24/7, every day, every month, and not just showing up when it's time to check a box, when it's time to start thinking about, oh, we need to diversify. Those relationships take time, just like all relationships. I'm going to give you an example. When I worked in the arts organizations, it's easy for them to come to the African American community if they had an exhibition or some type of art that was coming in that was by an African American artist. But African Americans love all kinds of art. Certainly we love the art that we are represented in, but there's universal truth in art. And so don't come to us when it's kind of expected. Extend a natural, intentional conversation all along. I'm going to give you a quick example of intention. And it's not with an African American, but it shows you how companies can use things, innovation, to do this type of work and stretch themselves to build relationships. There's a gentleman who came to the Art Museum, Cincinnati Contemporary Art Center one time. He has cerebral palsy. He was with Starfire Council. He was in a wheelchair, could barely speak, and he wanted to work at the Contemporary Art Center. Wanted to work there so bad to do anything, right? And so, you know, every department was like, well, we can't take him, we can't take him, we can't take him, who's gonna take him? Well, we can't kind of say no. And so they came to the communications department, right? Logical space to have someone who's in a wheelchair and can't speak. And so it landed in my lap. Regina, what are you gonna do? Can you take this gentleman who wants to work in the Contemporary Art Center? So I huddled with my team and I said, he has a desire to work in this department. We have an obligation to explore that because he represents a population that should feel warm and welcome here. How are we going to do it? And so we sat and we thought about it. And the number one thing that we said, we cannot make it seem like we're pandering and we're standing him up as someone who is other, or as I put in my chat, an aside. How do we integrate this beautiful human soul into the fabric of our institution in an intentional way? So we put a GoPro on his wheelchair and we said we would have him tour the exhibitions, kind of fit his iPad in a way where we can transcribe information and record it in this recorded voice of him telling the public about his view of these exhibitions. And we would say it, Doug takes you there, right? And then we would put it on our landing page of the website, and he will be our ambassador. That will be the first person that people see, that will be introducing them to the exhibitions, but it will be in his voice, right? We did it, and it was a hit. And it was a hit because Doug represented the community. Anybody who had any type of difference was wrapped up in him. But we didn't make it an aside. We didn't make it something that was different. We made it intentional. How do you look at people and access the uniqueness and the universal truths at the same time in your community and bring them into your fold? You have to reach out and meet them where they are and be intentional every step of the way. And that goes with every department. Every department needs to be thinking about this. And these are hard conversations. Someone said in the chat earlier, how do you have these real conversations without offending people and microaggressions? You're going to have to be disruptive because they're going to be hard and people are going to be offended. But you have to give your team permission to be vulnerable and be bold and take the next step. Every department has to commit to diversity. Every department has to commit to innovative ways and real ways to reach out to diverse communities and find ways to bring them into the fold. And then it becomes a cultural thing.
Awesome. Thank you, Regina. Michael, anything to add to that from the standpoint of either building other relationships, other organizations, other tips or tactics?
Yeah, I think reaching out to organizations that are doing amazing work. I know the Urban League under Eddie Cohen is doing phenomenal work centered around COVID-19 and just really making an impact in the community. So supporting organizations like that. Also, the Black church is not talked about as much as it used to be, but is a huge impact in our community. Collective Empowerment Group is in Cincinnati. That's an excellent organization people should reach out to because you definitely want the church community involved in anything that you do as far as diversity and inclusion. And then organizations, professional organizations like Black Achievers who are attracting a wide variety of African-American professionals that allows us to really zero in on particular verticals that you might be interested in, right? So if you just want IT professionals, we have several hundred of those. Or if you need African Americans that are in the healthcare industry, we have hundreds. So those types of things. We have a broad scope, and then also organizations like National Black MBA and those types of organizations definitely connect. If you don't have partnerships with Black organizations, then you do not have a true pipeline of African American talent. I mean, that's the bottom line. So if you can look at your organization and say, hey, are we sponsoring events? Are we doing co-located events at like you said, where they are? Or if we're not doing these things, then how can we expect to have diversity in our company? And that's the types of partnerships, and those are the types of organizations I would recommend people reach out to.
Awesome.
I'd like to add to that. Don't forget about Black Press. Don't forget about the Cincinnati Herald. Don't forget about Radio One. Don't think about where the people that you seek to bring into your fold, where do they live, work, and play? Where do they pray? Where do they gather? Where do they hang out on the weekends? What do they do in their spare time? Go to where they are. And Black Press is key. And again, not always going because we need something from you, but just go to have a conversation. It's easy to write an editorial and put it in the Cincinnati Herald to tell the community about what you're doing and what you would like to offer them or how they could fit into the culture of your business and what you're seeking. Having real, consistent, intentional conversations where people are builds trust. That's something that we haven't said yet. You have to build trust, and that is one step at a time. And thinking about the long game, it's a marathon to build trust, but the payoff is great.
Thank you, Regina. And I'd like to also just build on a couple of points that both of you mentioned. And I think it's really important, just especially given the environment that we're in nationally. And for some, this will be review, perhaps not so much for others. And that is, we talk a lot about networks and ecosystems and things of that nature today. And often there's not the recognition and understanding that, sadly, if you will, the darker part of our history with racial segregation literally spawned dual ecosystems. And so when we think about the reality of the separate but equal doctrine, and it frankly was not until 1954 with Brown versus the Board of Education that racial segregation was finally deemed unconstitutional. Prior to that point, it was constitutional law to have a separate but equal doctrine. So what did that do? That one literally spawned dual networks. And we have to also think about the recency of that. We're talking about our lifetime, 1954, the 50s, 60s, 70s, just the beginnings of trying to desegregate our landscape. I think about many of the organizations, for example, we talk about professional groups. Well, African-American physicians could not become part of the American Medical Association, so they created the National Medical Association. You literally have a African-American or Hispanic or Asian professional group in every discipline. The National Society of Black Engineers, you can go down the list. And so to Michael's point about partnering with professional groups, they are amazing talent networks. And quite frankly, we are very much in a place of still integrating our society in many respects, especially from an economic standpoint, a capital standpoint. So because of the very fabric of our nation sort of creating a dual ecosystems, if you will, reaching out to the minority organizations that have been mentioned and others to help bridge these gaps and bridge these divides. We talk about building trust and relationships. Well, like any other relationship, it starts with common ground. And there are so many aspects of common ground, and just, I like to refer to them as irrelevant, but disconnected networks. And as you begin to make these connections, you'll find the relevancy and the common ground. It's amazing what relationships can then spin from there as we take these initial steps. So this piece about proactively and intentionally reaching out to appropriate and professional groups and networks is so vital, so vital. I'd like to spend a little bit of additional time on the vendor side just for a couple of minutes, and I'll just kind of touch on that briefly so we open it up for questions from our listeners. One of the other aspects, of course, that we try to help our businesses with and our corporate partners is who they do business with. And so whether that is, of course, within the direct supply chain or consultants and legal services and marketing and communications like Regina and others. And so this too, in the spirit of real talk, has to be an intentional and bold step, because we all are products of habit, creatures of habit. We do business with those that we know and trust, understandable. So inclusion, almost by definition, requires building new relationships. And so it also requires some risk taking when you're talking about bringing on new vendors. And so we try to bridge some of that gap by creating some of these relationships, if you will, or being this bridge. But we can do all of our necessary work in helping to make sure minority and women entrepreneurs are as prepared as they possibly can be. But ultimately, a decision has to be made to do business with. And so that is really where the relationship building has to take place. At some point, folks just have to take a chance with some new vendors by women and people of color. So if there's anything that both Regina or Michael want to add to any of that narrative, please do so. I think you're on mute. There you go.
I will just start off with saying, if you want the same results, you keep doing the same thing over and over again, right? And innovation takes time, and disruption is uncomfortable. But if you want, and really, it's a kind of a bottom line thing. You really can't afford not to if you want to survive and move forward. So if not now, when? And it's not going to be utopia, right? There's going to be some bumps along the way, as there always will be. But the beauty of it is that you get to grow together. And that's what I would say to that. That if you want to have the same results, keep doing the things the same way. But you'll eventually get over to where you need to be because of where we are all heading and where the country is growing, what our demographics are looking like, what the public is thirsty for. And they want diversity. They need diversity. I don't know how many people on this chat right now who instinctively, if you're African American, Hispanic, a person of color, will you shop? Will you do business with someone, some organization? If you see ads, if you see websites, if you see Facebook, and you never see yourself, will you want to work with that company? Will you want to do business with that company? And so if you're in a company that holds on to antiquated ways of doing business, just kind of take an audit and take a look and see if it's the diversity that is out in the public that is thirsting for that. Because diversity, one of my wonderful mentors, Jerry Kaufman from LPK, said diversity is not just what you see, it's what you don't see as well. So the beauty of when you bring people in that immediately you know there's diversity of their background, how they look, how they pray, you know that they have different experiences. That's going to bring a richness and an innovation to your company.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Regina. Anything to add to that, Michael, at all?
I would just add, be tactical, be strategic. If you're using those types of metrics in your business to grow your business, we need the same thing and same effort in diversity and inclusion. Set targets and goals, figure out what relationships will get you there, what time aligns will get you there, and what getting there looks like, right? I mean, when we're partnered with Flywheel, it was very straightforward. He said, hey, we have one African-American coach and we would like to grow that. We grew it 7 times, right? There's up to 8 people now are coaching there. That's a tangible metric. Track these metrics so that we can all start to understand that we're making progress and have a benchmark and measure from that benchmark forward. We want to hear from companies that say, hey, we're doing well and this is what well looks like, so that other companies can say, oh, okay, I can go ahead and start to benchmark my company and do the same thing as far as diversity and inclusion. And I think that will start to help move the needle forward. I think right now, a lot of the conversations are very ambiguous without tangible metrics behind them. And we can help start to develop those, and then we'll start to see improvements.
Excellent. Excellent. Let's try to take a few questions from our listeners here. So if I can lean on my colleague, Amy Thompson, are there any questions that we perhaps can begin to address as a group?
Thank you, Darren. There's some great questions that have been coming in, really people asking for some examples. And Regina, I know you answered this in the chat, but perhaps you could jump in a little bit more about some companies that are providing some good examples that people should really look to.
Mm-hmm. I will tell you, I will first as a nonprofit and an arts institution. And I say that with this disclosure that I worked at the Art Museum years ago, right? And at that time, under the former director, they were kind of beginning this evolution of really trying to opening the doors wider at the Art Museum, of making people feel welcome and comfortable in the halls of it, right? So we were doing some really great work of making sure we were showing up, that we were capturing the diversity, and we were making intentional relationships with groups. We were inviting the links in, we were inviting the NAACP. We had this one reception one night with all of the chambers to come in and just enjoy, right? Just enjoy and have a conversation, getting used to being in there, being used to being invited with no angle, right? And it has really grown. If you look at the response that the Art Museum has had since this revolution has started in May, this racial revolution that has started, the conversations that they are having on Facebook and Instagram is remarkable because it is not pandering. It is honest. It is authentic. It is intentional. They are lifting up and elevating artists of color, real conversations. It's in their marketing. It's in their advertisement. It feels so real and welcome. It is layered. Cameron Kitchen is awesome. He's my hero and I love him. And I think that you should look at the model that he has used because it has worked over time of integrating this in the language of the Art Museum. I also like Kroger. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to, cherry pick because there's so many in Cincinnati. But I just, for a corporate, of course, P&G, we know that, they're key, right? But Kroger is amazing if you look at their social media. Who are they putting up? Who is speaking on behalf of the organization? Who are the real people that they're showcasing, right? We all shop at Kroger, but there is a time when the places that we shopped and we worked at and we supported, they didn't show us that we were really wanted there. And now this real wonderful evolution has occurred. And Kroger is only one of the many corporations that I have seen that is doing an excellent job of showing up externally.
Absolutely. We have a question that's just come in actually for both panelists. It says, doing the same thing gives the same result is a great quote. What would you say you are doing different that will bring better results? And either of you can respond to that.
Yeah, I can go. So I think what's different about what we're doing that has not been done is relationship building. Like I said, that's key. You can't really, and we've talked about it, you do business with people you know, like, and trust. You take that for granted in your personal network, but you have to be intentional in order to include African Americans and people of color. Mm-hmm. And you need some way to be actionable. And that's what a Black Achievers gives you. And that's what's different, is that you can come to an event, you can explain what your business or your company is doing or what you're looking for as far as diversity on your board, and interact with a vetted source of African American talent. And that does not exist in Cincinnati prior to Black Achievers, and really doesn't exist in any other city that I know of. We have to start building these types of collectives so that you have an area to go to that you can implement these ideas and strategies in a way that lead to change. So I think that's the big difference that we're bringing, at least on our side. I know, Regina, if you had some comments on that.
Well, just a few. I think that what right now communications, what we do is that we, first of all, this is hard work. Let's just take a step back. This is hard work. And there's no robots on here. We all have emotions and we're all bringing our own stuff to the table, and nobody wants to feel badly. Nobody wants to be shamed, and no one wants to feel guilty. And that is part of some of this stuff that keeps people stuck in doing the same things over and over again because it's safe. What we do is that we give you permission to be vulnerable. Right? You don't know everything. You're not supposed to know. We give you permission to be vulnerable and step boldly into doing things differently. We create pathways so that you can have productive conversations with diverse audiences. We help you with language, visual, nonverbal, to help you ease those difficult, courageous conversations. And we show you how and where to do that. So we are like your translator. And we make it a little bit easier. You're going to take your medicine, right? But it's not going to feel so bad. And you're going to be better for it. So we help you do the hard work. So it's empowering.
Excellent. Excellent. I'd like to add a real quick piece that takes it up a level from the standpoint of the region And we talk about the business competitiveness and some of the business case for inclusion, which is also rooted in relationships. Now that, of course, it is more commonly understood that our nation is becoming increasingly more diverse, depending on the projection that one looks at. This will be a majority minority nation, if you will, in the next 15, 20 years. And so what that means from a business standpoint, of course, is that your customer is changing. How you relate to that customer needs to change along with it. And so the images, the partnering, all the things that we're talking about are very relevant. And so we have these same sorts of discussions, if you will, at a regional level from the standpoint of the more that our region as a whole, from small business to large business, is practicing these inclusive behaviors, then we create an environment where people of color, people from all walks of life, view our region as a place of opportunity for all citizens. You hear a lot about the war on talent across the country. And so, of course, in an increasingly diverse nation, people will be drawn to communities where they believe there's opportunity for all people. So the more we can aggregate and combine and partner on these sorts of activities, we all win. We all win because we will be driving more talent to the region, more business to be done in the region. Many major corporations are making their relocation decisions based on how inclusive a community is. And so it goes on and on and on from an economic ripple effect standpoint. And so these are fantastic suggestions in terms of starting points to begin to intentionally build out your relationships. And I would just kind of have us think back again to when I say relevant, because there's so many relevant but disconnected networks. And so the more you engage with the relevancy of your business, and we can help you with who those organizations are, who those leaders are, you will be amazed at the synergies, like any other common ground and any other common bond. When you bring relevant folks together, magic can happen. And so we're super excited about the opportunity that's presented to us here. As we close out today, I want to encourage everyone to go back to the list that we started the session with. And so, making a commitment to act on some of these thoughts and ideas and some of what you've heard today. In the chat, please share with us a relationship perhaps that you may start with. Will you focus on hiring, your vendors, your marketing, etc.? Please do share with us how you're thinking of getting started. And certainly as a follow-up to today, we would love to be able to continue this dialogue, because it's in the practical application of what we're talking about is where the magic, so to speak, can really begin to take place. I want to remind everyone just about, again, the value of long-term relationships. We spoke briefly about the succession planning piece. We'll have much more information coming out in that regard. But I will tell you that as we have had more and more discussion with, if you will, just mainstream business owners that are approaching retirement age, their kids have gone on to do other things and had not really considered the power of potentially selling their business to a minority entrepreneur and the economic ripple effect that it stands to take place there. We see so many examples of minority businesses that disproportionately hire, of course, people of color. And so the more business entities that we have of size, you will certainly see that play out as well. And so the legacy that individuals can create for themselves by selling their business, if you will, to the right minority buyer, the ripple effect of that can be, frankly, incredible. So there's so much more happening in that regard that we'll certainly follow up on in future discussions. But I want to just take a moment here just to thank once again Regina and Michael for this insightful conversation. We truly hope this dialogue has sparked some interest and curiosity to use the tools that we've talked about, relationships, networks, etc. These are very real things, if you will, that can take place, and it starts with the first step, which is a decision. And so, as Regina mentioned several times, this is not easy, and we're not in any way making any claim that it is an easy task, but it's certainly one that is doable and critical at this time. I'd like to now turn it over briefly here to Cincinnati USA Regional Chamber's Senior Director of Sales and Engagement, Beth McNeil. Beth?
Thank you, Darren, for a great job moderating, and what a terrific discussion with Regina and Michael. Thank you all for sharing your time, your talents, your treasures, and keeping the conversation real, and a lot of great resources that have been shared. A special thank you also to our sponsor for this series, BI3, Bethesda Inc.'s grant-making initiative to transform health. And I'd like to note that virtual programming like this one is one of the many benefits of Chamber membership. Virtual programming at the Chamber, like this series, will be available for members at no cost, and others will be welcomed at a nominal fee. I'd like to share 2 updates on things happening at the Chamber. First, applications are being accepted for Building Cultural Competence, a program for leaders. This is a program that will allow you to go deeper with some of the content that you heard today, and you'll be hearing in the Racial Equity Series, and applications for that program are due August 21st. Second, we've launched a membership campaign with a variety of incentives and benefits. One incentive is the opportunity to give the gift of business. Companies or individuals are able to gift a membership to a small MBE with between 1 and 20 employees for only $400, and that membership will be good through December 2021. So as you think about ways to get involved and connected, like you heard today, making a difference going forward, please consider the gift of membership for an MBE. Additionally, I'd like to note members have access to a wide range of cost savings programs provided by our 11 partners like Shakely, Humana, and Office Depot, just to name a couple. Members have used our group buying power benefits to save nearly $22 million on everyday expenses. So please check out our website for information on those incentives. And if you're interested in learning more about becoming a member or maximizing your membership benefits, please reach out to Monty Taylor, who's the Chamber's membership development rep, and you can reach Monty at 513-686-2945 or email him at mtaylor@cincinnatiChamber.com. Thank you again from everyone at the Cincinnati USA Regional Chamber. We hope that you'll tune in for the rest of the series. And as you log off today, please remember to wear a mask, stay connected, and be encouraged. Use what you learned today to make a difference in our community. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Beth. And so as we sort of sign off here, we have maybe 2 minutes. So maybe in that time, a minute each. Regina and Michael, any just words of wisdom as we wrap up?
Michael, you can go first.
Well, thank you, Regina. Words of wisdom would be just be intentional, as we've discussed. And like you said, this is not an easy problem. It will require a lot of effort from everyone on everyone's side, but know that people are willing and able to connect and want to connect and solve these problems and make Cincinnati a great place.
I would say don't be afraid to make any missteps, because you have to make some missteps to know what's going to work for your organization. Reach out to people that you know that are in diverse communities and have real conversations with them on what you can do to strengthen your DEI strategies within your own company. And above all, lean in with those universal truths. That's going to get you there faster.
Awesome. Thank you both once more just for a terrific conversation. Thank you, Beth. And thank you all for listening this afternoon. We really do appreciate you tuning in. And on we go. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Take care.